It's great to see you all here today. I'm Jason Grillo with Air Miners, and today we're going to be joined by our guest David Lang at experiment.com. Who's going to be talking about about the Bezos Earth Fund prize. But we're excited to see this new program spring up because, as we know, carbon removal still is in its infancy, and ways of inspiring and getting you as carbon removal innovators in the game and getting to a place where you can develop and vet and hone your idea to a place to be world-changing and impactful in a meaningful way. That is why we're here today. In Air Miners, we're on the mission to remove the first 1 billion tons of CO2 from the atmosphere by the end of 2030, by any means possible. And the Bezos Greenhouse Gas Removal Earth Fund prize is an excellent way of helping us on our journey to achieve that. So without any further ado, what we're going to do is have David Lang talk a little bit about the prize based on his perspective at experiment.com. And then I might ask a question or two. And then the majority of the time is actually going to be Q&A with you, our audience, asking questions of David, and I will monitor the chat, see what people have to say. That's where you should put your questions while David is speaking. After that's done, we can have people raise hands and go from there. So thank you all again for coming. We're going to, like I said, this is going to be recorded and put on our YouTube channel. So if you happen to miss something, it will be available for public viewing in another day or two. And with that, I want to give the floor to David Lang, and I'm going to make you co-host, David, so that you'll pop up to the top of people's screens, and ask you to unmute and talk a little bit about what the prize is and what experiment.com's role is in that for you.
Sure, yeah. So hi, everybody. Good to see so many faces and people turning on their cameras. I appreciate that. It makes me feel not so alone. So I'll start. My name is David Lang, and I'll start with this caveat that I am not part of the Bezos Earth Fund. I am representing an organization called the Experiment Foundation. We're a separate group, and maybe I'll give you a little bit of background about my story and how I got into this, because I think that's actually important. 10 years ago, a little more than a decade, my friend and I were building a underwater robot in his garage, and we didn't have much money or resources, and so we were buying motors off, Alibaba and wherever we could get them for cheap, and we built a really low-cost underwater rover called OpenROV, and we got really lucky in those early days. Before it was a company, when it was still just a project and kind of a science experiment, could we build this for cheap? We got a small grant that allowed us to buy some extra parts and keep going. And so that project, we launched on Kickstarter and started a company, and it eventually merged and became So Far Ocean, which is still going and growing. But that experience really stuck with me, the importance of giving a nudge to early stage projects. And so since stepping back away from So Far, I wanted to pay that forward. And so that's why I started the Experiment Foundation and partnered with my friends Cindy and Denny, who started Experiment, and have been using that platform to give out grants for early stage science and technology projects. So, this is, we pride ourselves in being able to fund individuals before things are necessarily companies or nonprofits, or who knows what they're going to turn into, when they're just questions that I wonder if this works. And so we've been doing that for a few years. And the thing that we've gotten really good at, I would say, is helping new fields get started. So 10 years ago, when we were building underwater robots, ocean tech and the blue economy and all this stuff that's going on now, all this momentum didn't exist. It was just some kind of enthusiasm and interest on our part. And we've done this a handful of times now, going into new fields, and I don't think greenhouse gas removal is necessarily a new field. I mean, look at how many people are showing up to this and working on this and getting started. But it was a new field. I remember seeing Tito in many labs, I don't even know, 5 years ago, and him telling me this was something he wanted to work on. It seemed like a wild idea. And so it's really cool to see this community grow. It's cool to see this industry grow. And we are hoping to, provide a lot of seed funding for new ideas. So I explained what we do to the Bezos Earth Fund team, and they are really interested in greenhouse gas removal right now. They are kind of formulating a strategy and doing a lot of things. But one of the things they wanted to do is to leverage experiment to, be that kind of catalyst for new ideas, but also get a lot of ideas on their radar. And so we have designed this ideation prize to, one, kind of take advantage of what's good about experiment, but we've also widened the scope of what we're doing too, to just make it easier for folks like you to get your ideas onto their radar. So all that being said, I'd love to give you a tour of this and kind of show you what we're doing. And then I don't want to talk too long, and then I'll open it up for your questions, because that's most important here. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is the experiment, experiment.com, easy domain to remember. We have all of these projects here. I'll go back and show you more about these projects in a bit, but I want to jump right into the greenhouse gas removal page. So if you're on experiment and you scroll down, you see the challenge grants, and then this one stands out. That's where you want to click. I'm sure all of you have seen this page. So the way we're organizing this ideation prize is really in two different phases. The first phase is really quite straightforward. You're submitting your idea, where you'll just open this up and there's a fill out a type form, and it's the majority of it is a question, 500 words to submit your idea in the form of what's the challenge and what's your solution. It's a really actually quite a light lift for this, but that's kind of the phase one. That's where you start. That's actually all you need to do, is just fill out that idea form. So I don't know how many people have done that already, but I encourage you to do that, because the early submission deadline is February 1st. And this is important for a few reasons. One is the amount of money is determined. You get an extra $1,000. So you can get up to $4,000 if you submit early. Otherwise, it's only up to $3,000. And that's if you do the later deadline of March 1st. Also, the Bezos team is working really hard to put together their strategy right now, and having meetings. And so the earlier deadline is not just a financial win for you, but it's also a better chance for you to get your ideas seen and considered. And then which we also have, which I thought was so cool, is we added this phase 2 for up to $50,000 to execute on various research goals. So this is the top 12 or so projects will be invited if they want. They don't have to. Phase 2 is completely optional, to submit a full experiment, which you can go back and look at that in a second, but a full experiment page, which we can fund up to $50,000 to actually execute a research program over the next 12 months. So I thought that's really cool. So if there's ideas that come through that really need sussing out from a research perspective, we can provide a fast grant to make sure that that kind of stuff happens. So I'm just going to go through the page to kind of highlight things that I would hope folks would pay attention to and would consider when they're thinking about this. So the big one is, and you probably noticed this if you've read this is a really broad call. So we're talking about ideas in science and technology. So if you have a technological solution or you have a research project that you think needs to get executed, those are worthwhile. We also have markets and finance, socio-behavioral aspects and communities, policy and regulation. A good example of this is the advanced market commitment that Stripe did for, which preceded the Frontier offtake agreements. That was a markets and finance solution. That was a really kind of applying an idea that had worked in public health and taking it and saying, hey, let's see if we can apply this to this nascent industry. So if you have ideas that fit into that category, whether that's patent pools or patent buyouts or any kind of policy and regulation idea that you think is something that we can execute on or that could be executed on, I would definitely submit those. I think that's one thing I will just continue to highlight when I talk to folks is we have a pretty wide aperture here on what's possible. That being said, I'm going to add one kind of caveat to that, which is nature-based solutions, where those are not kind of within the scope of this this ideation prize. It's not because they're not important. Of course they are. We all know that. But the Bezos Earth Fund has decided that that's a different initiative that they're going to pursue, and that this one they want to focus on more of the technical side of greenhouse gas removal. So a wide aperture, but that does not include nature-based solutions. So I would keep that in mind. It would include, for example, like enhanced ecosystem recovery stuff. So if you think about the drones deploying seedlings, or using genetic enhancement for coral to make them more resistant to bleaching, or different things that are actual interventions or technologies for enhanced ecosystem restoration, those are inbound. So it's kind of a confusing line. I'm happy to talk more about it, but I'll just leave it there for now. So like I said, the first phase is up to $4,000. So how that breaks down is it's $2,000. If you're one of the top 50, you get the prize. It's $2,000 for being in the top 50, an extra $1,000 if you submit before February 1st. So I encourage you all to submit today, tomorrow. And then an extra $1,000 if you filled out a survey that the Bezos Earth Fund has provided to gather more information on this. So you can get up to $4,000 for that submission. We have grants of the 50,000. If you go to this page and you click on prize details, you'll see all of this written out, the $2,000, the $1,000 bonuses. You'll see the timeline when we expect to do everything. I would really encourage you to spend some time looking at the evaluation criteria. So this is exactly the rubric that we will be giving the judges, with, of course, a little bit more detail. But this is what we are looking for. So potential impact, feasibility and viability, innovation and originality, clarity and coherence, interdisciplinary integrative approaches, environmental social responsibility, and alignment with the program goals. And if you're wondering what the program goals are, you can kind of refer back to that main page about what they want to do. So there are some limitations about who can apply and who is eligible for grants. And these are kind of confusing, and they are really, I want to explain them, and I also want to kind of take responsibility, because the reason we have some of these eligibility requirements in place is not because we think nonprofits are better than for-profits or anything like that. It's just a function of we have this little foundation, the Experiment Foundation, and we have some constraints on which organizations that we can fund. So the cool thing about it running a small nonprofit is we can move fast. So if you want to launch an ideation prize really quickly, we're good to do that. The downside of that is we don't have the infrastructure to support every kind of organization that we wanted to. So where we settled on this was the innovation prize is open to everyone, individuals, nonprofit institutions like universities or NGOs. You can submit as a for-profit company, although we cannot give grant awards to those for-profit companies. So again, that's a constraint of the Experiment Foundation and our mandate to fund science for the public good. So you can submit your idea if you're still interested in submitting your idea to get it on the radar and to potentially become one of those top 50 awards. You can still submit. Or if you want to submit as an individual who you have a research, like let's say you work for a company, but you think there is a research question that would be good for the entire field that you think is an idea worth submitting. So for example, like I've been writing and thinking a lot about technical standards. It seems to me that technical standards are very relevant for some of the challenges that are in carbon removal and greenhouse gas removal. So if you have specific ideas around what kind of standards need to be created or who could be created, like how to implement that, you could submit that as an individual separate from your for-profit company. So you might think about that, like what ideas are not just going to be good for my organization and my company, but what ideas could we submit here that are going to be good for the entire field? We're really looking for those kinds of things. So again, if that's not clear, I'm happy to take more questions about that and tell you more about it. We have a country list. Again, this is not because we like these countries better. This is just a constraint over our payment infrastructure and who we can pay out to right now. So these are the eligible countries. One thing I will also note is you can have up to 5 separate ideas that you submit. Like if you have a standards idea and you have a technology idea, you're welcome to submit up to 5 of those ideas. You can win multiple of these prizes. So that's another thing, is you don't just have to pitch your company here. You can pitch like ideas that you think are really good that you want to see folks execute on. We'll distribute the prize awards. A big question is IP. This has come up quite a bit. We're not going to make any claims on your IP. The Bezos Earth Fund has told me that they're not interested in making any claims on anyone's IP. What we want to do is support good new ideas. And so you should talk to I'll say that we're not interested in owning IP or taking any credit for it, but you do want to be careful about your own disclosures. So talk to your own lawyers, do your own research, submitting to a public contest like this, there are disclosure things that come up. So you want to talk to your legal team around that. If you are concerned about IP, you do make sure that you dot your I's, cross your T's on what an enabling disclosure is and how to not do it here, because we don't want you to. This is more to the nature-based solutions aspect and the carbon capture at the source. I don't actually know. I don't know how this question came up, so I'll have to do some more digging on that. Must be a frequently asked question. Let me see what else I want to say about this. Okay, the last thing I'll say is around phase 2. So if you are one of the top 12 prizes or the top 12 entrants, we will invite you to do a phase 2, and that will be a full experiment. So I'll give you a look of what those look like. What's a good one here? So full experiment is something that happens on experiment all the time. You can start a project at any time, regardless of this grant. And it is a campaign to raise funding. And again, we'll provide up to $50,000 for those. It's about the project. You can add more context and links and more significance. So it's much, and then a budget of what you actually want to execute on. So this is much broader, some endorsements, a timeline. This is experiment's really real sweet spot. And you can add lab notes for updates. And you can do this if we do this, if you're invited for the phase 2. So I wouldn't worry about this unless you're always welcome to crowdfund on experiment, but I would wait and see how phase 1 goes to answer to have to think about this kind of full experiment. In the meantime, right now it really is a low lift. It's just that 500-word essay about what your program is and your idea is and how it addresses the challenges of greenhouse gas removal. So that's kind of what I've got, and I will. Oh boy, I just opened up the chat, so see there's
All good.
questions.
All right. Thank you, David. Question I have, noting that most of the people in our community, although certainly not all, are about carbon dioxide removal. To what extent are you considering things like, knowing that this is a greenhouse gas removal prize, plaudits for that. Which greenhouse gases are that are not named carbon dioxide are you thinking of?
Yeah, so good question. So obviously the CDR stuff is very welcome and interesting and important here, but so is methane and nitrous oxide. If there are ideas in those regards, those are welcome too. All the greenhouse gases. So I wouldn't, I don't want to say, like if you're working on one that we're not thinking about, like let us know and tell us why it's important, or what ideas you have for it. So it is open to those others as well.
Got it. Thank you. I want to turn to some of the audience Q&A. So there's been a pretty active chat going on. So thank you to those who put questions in. I went back and forth with some folks. John Fitzgerald, would you care to unmute and ask your question? Oh, John, you're still muted.
There you go. I had a couple of questions, Jason. I'll just list the 2 or 3 questions I had and
please
I can answer them. One was to help us understand better the limitations of nature-based versus non-nature-based, as many of these ideas are essentially helping nature, but with added components or in a scale and scope that is not yet available to nature itself. That's the primary question. The second question might be, do you have a non-disclosure agreement or potential contract that protects the intellectual property of the applicant that fits your purpose and is likely to be fitting the applicant's purpose or can be modestly adjusted for that? Although I admit it's very good for each outfit to have its own lawyer. I'll stop there.
Okay, so this line is kind of tricky, and we had a lot of discussions about it. Where is a nature-based solution? Because like planting lots of trees is probably a no, right? But if you're doing something like living carbon, where you're trying to have more C4 instead of C3 photosynthesis, and you think you have genetically engineered trees that are going to do that, I think that is imbalance. So I would say the term I've been using is enhanced ecosystem restoration, and that's not a technical term. But if you are developing tools and technologies or research or solutions for accelerating that, I would submit it. I think if it's close to that line, I would just like I said. The type form and the first phase of this is really, I think it's a pretty light lift, and even if you didn't win, we're going to read all of these, and these things are going to be considered. So, I would submit. If you think it's close to that line, Don't wait for me for an official ruling. I would just submit it.
Got it. Got it. So in other words, for those of the audience who are doing, say, enhanced rock weathering or soil carbon
Sure,
sequestration or
definitely.
biochar.
Bring all of that. That's perfect. Yeah, that's great. And so, but the NDA stuff, I haven't developed an NDA. We talked a lot about this. And we just kind of, we just decided we just don't, we haven't developed it. If it comes up enough, I'll consider it, and I'll talk to my lawyers about maybe putting something together. However, I would just encourage you to talk more broadly about it. Like figure out a way to explain the idea, the challenge, and the solution without. I think it's pretty straightforward. Like what would be an enabling disclosure. So that's what I would encourage you to talk to your legal advisors about.
Meanwhile, your paragraph 8 is a useful open statement that you don't intend to go after people's IP, but you might consider, especially before the $50,000 deadline, developing something that you're familiar and comfortable with, so we can meet halfway very quickly. That's all.
Yeah, it's a good question. If it keeps coming up, I will. Well, I have 2 days now, so I don't know how we'll be able to do it. But yeah, thanks.
Thank you, John. Next up, Herlin.
Hey, John, thank you. I have a couple of questions. I mean, you answered most of them, but one of them is, if we don't get selected, will there be any feedback on this, or is this like just a dream? And then the other one is, how early do you have to be, or like when are you not eligible anymore for this funding? Like if your idea is patented, or like if you have pre-seed money, or if you're seeded, how far, like when do you stop considering those ideas?
Like given the number of applications we've got so far and the number of judges I have lined up, I don't think we'll be able to provide detailed feedback, unfortunately. So I'm sorry about that. I wish I could. I don't think there's any. I wouldn't be concerned about stage 2. You're not going to be again. I explained the for-profit constraints that we have. But if some of your ideas may be further along, then I think that's fine to still submit them. You might consider also, like I said before, like parallel ideas, like things like I keep thinking about standards because I'm interested in it, but like ideas that aren't your company ideas, right? Like, wow, it'd be great if this research got done. This would help their whole field move forward. I think that's another thing. It's one thing to kind of pitch your company, which I understand. I've run companies. That's what you got to do. But this is kind of a cool opportunity where you can get other types of ideas that will help kind of indirectly, and also kind of get you more known and more on other people's radar as well.
Great. Thank you. Scott Bryson.
Thanks for having me. Good to see everyone here. I had a question about the phase 1 and phase 2. If we apply as an individual for phase 1 and then we move on to phase 2, could we transition that to a nonprofit at that point?
Oh yeah, I mean, you definitely can.
Okay.
So that'll be like you'll fill out a whole experiment page, and so you can that becomes a question of like when you accept the money, right? Like, so when the money gets transferred, will you have a nonprofit set up by then?
Yeah.
Or will you get it fiscally sponsored or something like that? Yeah, you could. Yeah, that should be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah, a follow-up question. That is from Jeff Maelstrom. Does a nonprofit need to be a 501c3?
Like, so if they're an international nonprofit,
Or
like
if
a
thinking the
501c4
American
or something.
context, 501c4, yeah, C4.
the funding cannot be used for political, well, I guess because we're talking about policy stuff. I know the 50, like our constraints are like lobbying and things like that. We can't be funding lobbying. So, but I think a policy idea.
So an individual had a policy idea, they'd like to have some money to research it, that is inbounds, but if they have a formal lobbying 501c4 organization, is that out of bounds?
Yeah, that would be, because our grant agreement that for that second phase, there's a grant agreement, and it's going to say this is not going to be used for lobbying purposes.
Ah, okay. Thank you. Okay, great. We got some people in the queue. David, you've been very patient. Unfortunately, we lost someone from the queue. But,
this is
David,
great. These are great questions. Like these are all these like little corners that I haven't quite, like sometimes I'm thinking about it for the first time. So
and we will save the chat, by the way, David. So anything that comes up, we can send to you. And by the way, David, if you don't mind sharing your email, if you have an email address you feel comfortable putting into the chat, in case people don't have their question answered or they come up with something later on to ask you, feel free to add that.
Yeah, and if I need to, I'll be better about it. If I need to go back and get more research, talk to my lawyers before this, then I will let you know too. Sure. So, but it's David@experiment.com.
Absolutely. Sorry, David. I've been delaying a little bit. Please go ahead. Ask your question.
Hi, David. It's David. So two questions. One super quick. Are you going to publish the applications? Because we don't really care about NDAs and stuff, but
not the full applications, just the names of the winners. But I think you should be, by submitting, you should expect that, like the idea might wind up in a report. Like if they publish a report on good new ideas, like they'll, in the agreement for this, it will say, and it does say this in the terms and conditions, that the right to publicize and talk about the idea. And I think that's where you could expect it, is something like that.
And that's okay, and that's fine by us.
Yeah.
The second thing is we're for profit, so we're fine. You're not going to give us some money, that's okay. But if you do like our proposal, it's like, hey, we would have donated to these guys if they weren't a for-profit. Are you going to publicize it, or can we say Bezos Earth Fund likes it? What's the kind of point for applying if you are for profit?
Yeah, well, I will say that this is not, this is one kind of, you will be able to say that you are a top idea in the Bezos Earth Fund $1 million greenhouse gas removal ideation prize contest. So you will be able to publicize that. So I think, the value judgment is kind of on your, is kind of up to you to decide. I mean, is that worth it? I don't know. I will say, with this caveat again, I am not the Bezos Earth Fund, right? So when they say they're interested in this, and they, this is probably a small sliver of a much broader, of course it is a much broader strategy. So, it's up to you to kind of take that and value that as you will, like what it means to kind of getting the foot in the door with this ideation prize. Sorry, I can't be more specific. I just don't have, I'm executing on my own little corner of this whole thing.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I mean, is this really experiment prize or a Earth Fund prize? And, because we would apply it because it would just be something that might give us a little bit of credibility in a certain tiny corner of the world. So,
well, we'll definitely going to be compiling all of the ideas, and I mean, they're going to see them, undoubtedly.
Okay, but the fact that we could say to someone, "Oh yeah, the Bezos Earth Fund like this," and that's fine. I
don't think you can say that specifically. I think you could say you are top, because it's an experiment foundation contest. We're the ones, we we've got the judges, and we do that. We have to do that for a bunch of specific reasons. You could say you were the finalist in the Bezos Earth Fund $1 million greenhouse gas removal ideation prize. I think that's all I can say.
Okay, thanks.
But you know what? But the question is a good question, and I will get guidance on exactly what we can say, what you can say. That's it. That's a good question.
Okay. For future follow-up, again, David Lang, you provided your email.
Yeah.
So anyone who wants to get a follow-up on their question, they should just email. I'm guessing they should just email you directly. Okay. Great. Nick, thank you for waiting in the queue.
Yeah, thanks. And thanks, David, for the presentation. I personally have a company that restores degraded soil with carbon removal using specific biochar enhanced with microorganisms. Would you recommend me to apply as a company and not like win the grant, or would you recommend me to apply some idea I have as an individual, and in case I win, like what should I do with the grant?
So it's up to you to decide how you want to do that in terms of, you know, if you apply as an individual and you win as an individual, you'll be recognized as an individual. If you apply as a company, you'll be recognized as a company. The $4,000 prize, there's nothing you have to do if you win this. Like there's no like, you know, reports or further things. For the 50,000, the phase 2, there is kind of, the goal is that you would be executing on a research project, or you would be continuing to do the research. And so you would be required to report back after a year on the status and progress of the research project. So the first phase, there's nothing that's going to be, no additional work necessary. For phase 2, there are some additional reporting requirements.
Thanks. And the last thing, I understood that the top 50 will win the prize. Do you know of that 50, how many will be for-profit companies? Or how is the methodology to select? No, okay.
I don't know yet. Like I said, I mean, the goal here is, the goal of our little project, our prize, is to help fill a niche in the ecosystem, which is new ideas that need help getting started, or ideas that, you know, just need a little bit of a nudge. We understand that, personally, Experiment understands that there's a much broader world out there. There's, you know, big, you know, offtake agreements by Frontier. There's lots of VCs investing in companies. There's governments who are pouring money into this stuff. And sometimes it's really hard for new ideas to find their way in that kind of world that's seemingly built for bigger organizations, and maybe even this kind of the familiar suspects kind of thing. So that's what we're, you know, when in doubt, we're kind of making decisions to make sure that our system here is open to a lot of people. And unfortunately, that has some constraints for the company side and things like that. But so anyways.
Okay. And John Fitzgerald.
Yeah, just
and then we'll do Joe and then Rocio.
Right. Just in case folks don't get a chance to read the chat, I want to make sure people don't feel discouraged by any fear about what 501c3s and 4s can do. It's up in part to the grantor to decide, but there's no reason why either a C3 or a C4 could not agree to sequester, shall we say, the funds that come in and promise not to use those for lobbying or electioneering, which they could use some of their funds for otherwise. So that's just to encourage folks to go ahead while you resolve the answer on your side, David, and you know, all the other folks. That's all on that point. And then the other question is, so many of these ideas are very, very similar. How do you plan to share the awards for groups that come in coincidentally offering the same idea?
That's a good question. So far, there's been I think enough. I think we're gonna have to leave that to the judges to do. So I think it's going to, put some time into the essay. I think the essay, you have 500 words. It's not a lot, but it's going to come down to how well you describe the challenge and the solution. Also, you have the opportunity to add additional references and links, and you have kind of a bonus question in there about, you and your team and how you would execute on it. And so I think those can be the differentiators for ideas that may seem kind of common.
Thank you.
Excellent. Okay, next up, I thought we had Joe James and then Rocio, or Rocio and then Joe James.
I'm still there.
Yeah, why don't you go first and then we'll get to Rocio. Sorry.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Joe. Thank you. Good to see you again. Please, go ahead,
Can
Joe.
you hear me?
Yes. Joe?
Okay, so my nonprofit laid the.
Whoop.
Can you hear me?
Mm-hmm.
You went out for a second. You said your nonprofit
Okay.
did something. So
Go
ahead.
Yeah, my nonprofit laid the groundwork for a process that I developed and patented, by which we're using very fast and large growing biocrops that capture extraordinary amounts of CO2.
Right.
And then we harvest them and convert the plant material into biochar or other bioproducts to sequester it long term.
Yes, Joe.
Is that an eligible activity under the program?
Yeah, it sounds like there's quite a few things that you're doing. So, but yeah, I think the biochar and paralysis or whatever your methods are, I think those kinds of things are definitely in bounds.
Yeah,
Okay.
Our use of photosynthesis allows us to capture CO2 at a rate of $35 a ton or less, which makes our process very cost competitive. And we've engaged with utilities who have an interest in us putting their idle land to work.
Mm-hmm.
Cool.
Good job.
Sounds great.
Great.
I saw one question that I can answer quickly, which was how many applications are you expecting? My guess so far, based on the number that have come in, is I think this will be like the low hundreds, somewhere between 200 and 500 would be my guess. I know that's a wide range, but I don't think it's not like 10,000. It's not. So it's.
But that's why we're here. That's why we're
exactly. If you guys all have, everybody here submits 5 ideas.
Okay, Rocio, please.
Yes. Hi, David. Just to be clear, you said 5 ideas. So we're a for-profit company. Can you submit as a company and also as an individual?
That's a good question. Theoretically you could, I guess. I like every point. So like, let's say so the way the application works is you could submit, you still have to have a point person even if you submit as a group, there's still a point person. So if you submitted representing your company, you could, and then you submitted representing yourself, like say you had like a standards idea or something else, that would be 2 submissions. So you can submit some as individual and some representing the company, but those would all count towards the up to 5 ideas.
So as an individual and as a company would be 2 different ideas?
Well, if they are 2 different ideas.
Okay, so.
If it's the same, so you're trying to get it from the same idea from 2 different groups?
Yeah, well, also you could submit the same idea, one as a company and one as an individual. Anyways, you can toss it in any which way.
You could do that. I think that would be, yeah, I think that would be less good to do. I will make sure the judges kind of weed that out if someone's trying to game the system like that,
But
I think
you
that
could submit two different ideas, one as a company and one as an individual.
two different ideas, correct? Yeah, that's fine. It's the same idea from multiple things that is less in the spirit of the prize.
Got it. Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you. We're going to go to the FLT Foundation, and then Doc will get to you.
Hi, everyone. We're the Flora L. Thornton Foundation. Big supporters of Tito and air miners, and also love biochar. So yay. We were just wondering about the second phase cross timeline. So once the
Sure.
first phase is over and it's time for the 50,000 grants, are you guys thinking that's going to be this year, or is the timeline still TBD based on how the first phase goes?
It's definitely this year. I mean, it's the timeline. Let me just pull it up. I have this exactly. So as soon as the winners are announced in early April, you'll get an email from me saying, hey, it's go ahead and submit for, like if you're one of the top 12, 15, like probably top 12, we'll say, we'll invite you to submit a full experiment. And if you fill that out in a week, it's possible we could fund it in 2 weeks. It's like we can move really fast on that kind of stuff. But the kind of the deadline we're putting in there is August 25th. So we'll send you an email in April, and then the submission period to fill out that kind of experiment will be, you'll have a few months to do it, but you don't need to take the full 2 months.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Doc, good to see you again.
Yeah, David, thank you so much. This sounds like such an exciting program, very, very exciting. So just, this is like a splitting the hair. You said up to 5 different ideas. And then there was a question about submitting as a company and then submitting as an individual. So is that 5 per entity, or is that, look, we know that you're this company, 5 for you combined?
Yeah, I think it's 5 combined. I'm like just getting to the spirit of what we're trying to do.
Right.
So
and
I'm thinking, like, I'm kind of imagining all the ways you could game the system on this, and that's not good. That's not what the goal is. Like, if you have 5 like separate ideas, go ahead and submit them.
Right. So it wouldn't really matter if it could, I guess, if you were, but it shouldn't matter if you're submitting as an entity or as an individual. It should be the same effect.
Yeah.
And then this seems to be the first. Is this going to be an annual program or something? The reason I ask is because the deadline's like tomorrow. And so it would be great to know that we'll have another shot in December or something like that.
No promises on that. I mean, we've been focused on this one. It was a fast turnaround. It was a fast turnaround on our side as well, to make this happen. And so I kind of like that. I mean, sometimes, like, let's just not mess around. I mean, it's not, like I said, if you actually click through the type form, it's not such a, if you've been working on this or thinking about the ideas, it should be pretty easy. That being said, we're running grant programs all the time. We have our traditional funding model is we put scientists in charge and let them make quick discretionary decisions. So we've got a half dozen lined up that are going to be launching very soon. So we're running grant programs all the time. CDR and greenhouse gas removal is something that we see a lot of funder interest in. And so I could, of course, no promises, but I could definitely see a world where we have more early stage funding for ideas in this department.
Yeah. Thank you for being here and teaching us. Wonderful.
Thank you. You guys are the ones doing all the cool work. So glad to meet you all.
We're going to go to Gyami Shrestha, please. And then got a couple other questions after that.
Thank you, Jason, and thanks, Air Miners, for this session. And David, thank you for this very informative session. So my question is mainly about the review process. If you could share a bit more about the judge panels, the judging criteria and process. Will there be a call for judges, for instance? And what is the decision-making process? Who's the final decision maker on this? Would it be you, Bezos, the panel?
No, it's the panel, the judges. And so we've recruited a panel of judges, and it's from a variety of industries. It's not just industries, but we had to make sure that we have across markets and technology and science. And so your submission will get 2 reviewers and a total score that will be added up. And yes, the judges who are kind of experts in the field, I don't want to say who they are because then everyone's going to email them and be bothering them and trying to get in get in. So, but they are kind of experts in the field. So I don't, okay, this is a good question, that we don't need to explain those challenges beyond mentioning them. I think that's a fair assumption, that you should be talking to a colleague, but you want to be clear in explaining the challenge. I don't want to say talking to a colleague meaning you should omit basic details, because I think that clarity still requires explaining kind of the big picture of what you're doing. But you can't expect that this will be reviewed by colleagues and experts in the field.
Okay, thanks. Had some questions come up. Doc had a question about, is there a risk of conflict of interest with expert judges? Are they strictly academics?
They're not strictly academics. If there's any, we're asking them if there is any conflict of interest, that they recuse themselves from that application. It's tough, because carbon dioxide removal, or greenhouse gas removal, it's not a big, Tito's not a judge, but if we made Tito a judge, he knows all of you. So that's it's not we couldn't say that they couldn't know people, but we said, if they have any kind of financial interests, that those be disclosed and that they recuse themselves from that. So sure. The conflict of interest is something we're taking seriously, and being active about making sure the judges are unbiased.
Got it.
Tito is not a judge, I don't think. But I should.
Yeah. George Chafee, you had a couple questions in the chat. I don't know if you'd like to unmute and ask.
Sure, thanks. This has been a great discussion. So I wanted to ask, if you want to submit more than one proposal and you need some background information that's common to all of them, like this, we would be working with a biochar proposal. Do you have to repeat the same information in all of them? Because it seems like that's kind of a waste of the 500-word limit, when you could provide more details in the second or later proposals if you didn't have to repeat it all. Are there going to be the same judges reading all of the proposals?
Can't promise that. So I would say, unfortunately, you should repeat yourself.
Okay.
Sorry about that. Yeah.
That's okay. Yeah. Another question. Let's see. I'm trying to find it here. Where did I put that? So in the 500-word limit, can you put live links and do those live? I mean,
yes.
can you put live links? Can you put
not in the not in the 500 word. Well, maybe you can in the 500 word. It's like 2,000 characters or something. But then there's another question box for you to add, references, citations, further reading, things like that. You can do that.
So they can be links or they can be
They can be links, correct.
what about attachment?
Attachments that we do not have. I didn't set it up for attachments. It's just links.
Okay. I mean, are CVs, for example, something that you'd want to see?
Yeah. There's a separate box to tell us about yourself if you like who you are, and so I would click through the type form to see what your options are.
Okay, and it sounds like this 3,000 character limit is pretty loose because you can have 500 words that go over 3,000.
Sure. Yeah, the type form just only let me do characters, so I it's roughly 500 words. It's not exactly.
Yeah. Okay.
Got it. One last question from Dan, and then we'll conclude.
Oh, hi. Yeah, I was curious about technology to measure nature-based solution like a rover that would take soil samples, geotag it, and timestamp it, so it's duplicatable empirical process to do soil sample carbon testing.
MRV. Let me just see this. I think we meant to. The measurement, reporting, and verification is like a bucket that we are accepting submissions on, and we know that's a big challenge. Is measurement and reporting on all of this stuff. And so, if you have solutions to challenges in that regard, I think that's definitely in bounds.
Cool.
Okay.
Thanks.
Great. Thank you, Dan, and thank you, David, and thank you to our audience for such excellent questions. I really appreciated it. David is going to share, or he already shared, his email. If you have follow-up questions, it's david@experiment.com. A couple of final housekeeping notes. Post-event survey is now in the chat. It's also going to be an email. How do we do today? Good, bad, indifferent, but especially bad or indifferent. We want to hear what you have to say so that we can make our events better. We're always learning here in Air Miners. Today's no exception. And also keep your eyes peeled for our next event, which is going to be coming up in a couple of weeks. You'll be expecting an email about that in another few days. So with that, I just want to once again say thank you.